guys, so we're moving right along through the 12 Keys Challenge, and in particular, we're working through the three parts of the Gospel School of Music. So we're here in part number 2, and we're going to discuss in detail scales in music, and more specifically, what you need to know about scales to help you accomplish the whole goal of this course, which is to get you comfortable playing contemporary worship music in all 12 keys. So here's our game plan for part number 2. First, we're going to do a short recap of part number 1 where we talked about the number system. Then we're going to get started with part number 2, beginning with defining what scales are, then introducing the two most common scales used in gospel and Christian contemporary worship music, and lastly we'll talk about sharps and flats. So let's jump right in with a recap of part number 1. So in part number 1, it was all about the number system. And from that, we gave you 3 rules that you should know, which are, number 1, the number system we use to learn and play gospel and Christian contemporary worship music is based off the major scale. Number 2, the major scale is made up of 7 distinct notes, or to put it another way, 7 distinct physical piano keys. And lastly, the number system assigns numbers to musical notes and piano keys to help us easily translate music from one key to the next key. So if you guys haven't gone through part number 1, I think you need to go check that out because it's going to give you a great foundation ahead of the more challenging ideas that we're going to cover as we move through the course. But now we're ready to start with part number 2, where we're going to focus solely on scales in music. So first, why talk about scales, and why are scales important for us to know as gospel or Christian keyboardists? Well, to answer those questions, scales are at the foundation of everything we do and hear musically. At the core of any run, chord progression, or a song is a specific indefinite scale. So if you want to try and learn a new song, or a chord progression, or even a nice run that you may hear, if you can first identify what scale is being used, then you will be more than halfway to the point of learning it. So now let's define what scales are, and here's the definition. In music theory, a scale is described as any set of musical notes that follow a fundamental frequency or pitch. And to put it another way, basically in music, a scale is a set of notes that sound complete when played together and has a definite root note. We'll talk more about root notes here shortly, but for now, the main idea is that a scale in music has a complete and uniform sound when played. So now let's discuss scales from a piano keyboard player's perspective. And first and foremost, let's cover a few basic concepts surrounding the arrangement and structure of the piano. So point number 1, you should know that on a full-scale piano, there are a total of 88 keys. Point number 2, within the 88 keys, there are only 12 distinct notes, and those 12 notes serve as the foundation of all music. Think of the 12 distinct notes as a family made up of 12 children who have a lot of things in common, but individually are still very much unique. So let's play on the piano the 12 distinct notes which make up the 12 keys that you're going to master. So we'll start with C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat, A, B flat, and then B. Now moving further along, within the 88 keys, these 12 distinct notes are repeated from the bottom to the top of the keyboard. One complete set of 12 keys is referred to as one octave. Now the only difference between one set of 12 from another set of 12 keys is the pitch. The higher you go up the piano, the higher the pitch becomes for each key. Now the reason I'm covering these basic concepts is because the more familiar that you get with the overall piano structure and how the different keys relate to one another, the more confident you'll be that you can master all 12 keys. So now let's talk about root notes. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, every scale has a definite root note. And there's only 12 possible root notes, which are the 12 distinct keys. Now the reason we like to identify the 12 distinct keys as root notes is because they are the foundation and beginning note of any scale. So here are a few things that I think that you should know about a root note. Number 1, it establishes what key you're playing in. Number 2, it is the first degree of a scale. Number 3, In the number system, it is always referred to as the 1. And number 4, for most songs, it will be the starting and ending bass note. So now let's discuss which scales you need to be most familiar with as a gospel and Christian keyboardist. So the two most common scales used in gospel and Christian music are number 1, the major scale, and number 2, the minor scale. So let's delve a little bit deeper into these two scales, and I'm going to give you two formulas that you can use to learn these scales in all 12 keys. First, let's start with the more common of the two, the major scale. So the major scale has a very generic sound, and it's not only the most commonly used scale in contemporary gospel and Christian music, but it's the most common scale played across all of music. And in fact, the major scale acts as a foundation for all other scales in music. And that idea will make a whole lot more sense once we introduce the minor scale. So let's go ahead and give you that formula that you can use to find a major scale in any key. That formula is going to be root note, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And I'm going to show you exactly how to apply that formula on the piano, but first let me quickly explain what a step in music is. So a step in music is used to describe the distance between one note to the next, or on the piano from one physical key to the next. For example, if we move from the key of C to the key of D, that is considered moving up a whole step. And that's because we skip C sharp, which is the key right between. Now if we move from C up to the next note in between, that will be considered moving up a half step. Now the same concept holds true if we move backwards as well. If we move down from D to C, that's considered moving down a whole step. And if we move backwards from D to C sharp, that's considered moving down a half step. So with that said, let's use the formula that we just introduced to find the C major scale on the piano. Again, the major formula is root note, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So we'll start on our root note, which is going to be C, since we're in the key of C. We have our root note, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And there you have it, our C major scale. Now let's apply this formula to the key of E so we can find our E major scale as well with this formula. So we're going to start on our root note, which is going to be E. We have a whole step, a half step, a whole step, and we end with a half step. And that's our E major scale. Now before we talk about the minor scale and give you the formula that you can use to find it in every key, we have to first discuss what sharps and flats are. So a sharp note is created by raising the pitch of a natural note. And a natural note is easy to find on the piano because all of the white keys are natural notes. Now the symbol for a sharp is this character right here. Now because of social media, you may know this as a hashtag, but in music, it's the symbol for a sharp note. Now on the flip side, a flat note is the opposite of a sharp note.